Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video. No, it's not a challenge today, but rather a ranking of games we've already played several times on the channel, Pokemon Red and Blue. Today, we're going to debrief a bit on which trainers can pose the most problems during challenges by establishing a top 20 list of the toughest NPCs to beat in the game. Important information before we start. In this ranking, only the trainers that we are required to battle are included, and in Pokemon Red and Blue, there are 68 of them. So, in this ranking, the first ones we'll cover don't necessarily represent a major challenge, but they do require a strategy beyond just pressing the A button, often involving smart preparation. Oh yes, and another thing, this ranking is purely my opinion, and if you disagree with a certain position, I invite you to explain why in the comments. The debate could be interesting. Anyway, now that we are ready, let's start the ranking with number 20, the Bug Catcher in Viridian Forest. Yes, I have indeed included a Bug Catcher among the toughest trainers in the game, the one near Pewter City at the end of the forest. He's the only mandatory trainer in this area, and if, like me, you always speedrun this part of the game because there's not much to do around, you end up facing a level 9 Weedle with a starter that's barely at level 6. Depending on the matchup, this can be problematic, especially if the Weedle poisons you and your Pokemon isn't in good health. Number 19, the Pokemaniac at the beginning of Rock Tunnel. Another random NPC makes it into this ranking, and it's the Pokemaniac, named Ashton in the remakes, who has a Cubone and a Slowpoke. Normally, your team is ready to take him down easily, but his Slowpoke knows a Psychic-type move, making it a good matchup against your starter. While the battle can be finished quickly, the presence of this trainer in the ranking is mainly due to the fact that a trip back to the Pokemon Center before entering the tunnel is recommended, making it more annoying than anything else. Number 18, Blaine, the gym leader. Finally, a more famous trainer appears in this ranking, and it's unsurprisingly Blaine who occupies this spot in the first generation. Despite having 4 Pokemon, he's potentially the worst gym leader in the game, as apart from his Arcanine, the Fire-type moves he has are very weak, which is problematic for a 7th gym leader, ultimately flattening the game's difficulty curve. It's even recommended, once you have the 5th badge, to head back to Pallet Town to get his badge for some extra experience for the upcoming continental battles, and since you have to surf, the HM Surf wreaks havoc in this game. Number 17, Brock from Pewter City. As you might have guessed, we're going to cover a few gym leaders here, those who offer the least resistance. To me, Brock is a more difficult hurdle than Blaine, because there's a scenario where you don't have any super effective Pokemon against him, or you have undertrained Pokemon using normal moves on his rock types. However, apart from their good defense, his Pokemon are relatively weak, lacking any stab moves, and against Onix, you can even take the luxury of setting up when it uses Bide, the TM he gives you at the end of the battle. Number 16, Lieutenant Surge. The difficulty increases a bit when facing this trainer, but the reason he's in this position is mainly that the game offers us quick ways to defeat him. This is an exhaustive list, but here are 3 fairly easy ways. The first is the TM dig you get from the Rocket Grunt in the top right of Cerulean City, which has 100 power in this generation. It can be learned by a plethora of Pokemon, making it an excellent offensive solution. Another option is through the Nidorans, Pokemon you can catch early in the game, and by this point in the adventure, they are probably already at level 16, and with the Moonstone obtained at Mount Moon, you can get a final evolution with immunity to electric-type moves. Finally, in Vermilion City, the location of the gym, there is Diglett's Cave, and if you use a level 27 Pokemon at the head of your team, the only Pokemon you'll likely encounter using repels are Dugtrio, which have the move Dig. Capturing one allows you to easily take on Lieutenant Surge. Even the Diglets themselves do the job. Number 15, Erica. The danger with this gym leader is approaching her too early in the adventure when there's so much to do in the Celadon Saffron Lavender axis. An undertrained team will inevitably struggle against her Victreebel, which has one of the most broken moves in this generation, Wrap. Essentially, if the opposing Pokemon is faster than you, you can't attack until you're released, and if Victreebel doesn't miss its attack, you can be trapped for a long time. It also has Sleep Powder, which doesn't help as Sleep can last up to 7 turns in this generation, and Poison Powder, which pairs well with Wrap. However, if you take care of the Rocket Hideout and a few trainers at Pokemon Tower, this gym leader, who you can fight as the 7th if you want, is manageable. Number 14, Blue at Pokemon Tower. Here's the first appearance of the rival in this ranking, and here I've chosen the one you face in Lavender Town for the same reason as Erica. His team is balanced, with notably, depending on the versions, a Kadabra, a Gyarados, and his Pidgeotto, which likes to use Sand Attack. But this battle is also in the Lavender Celadon Saffron arc, so there's room to train before taking him down. Number 13, Giovanni. Here we're talking about the gym leader. The other times you face him, either he isn't a challenge, or it's right after a very tough battle, making him relatively easy in comparison. However, in the Viridian Gym battle, he has evolved performs at a high level. And if his team was a bit more diverse, and especially had decent moves, he could rank higher. But since he has 2 double weaknesses to water and grass, it's a breeze to face him late in the game when all our Pokemon have evolved, and we are required to have a Pokemon with Surf or Psychic. If you don't have a Pokemon with the move Psychic, you haven't understood the point of this game. You're missing one of the best moves in the game, on the best type in the game, and therefore, I decline all responsibility in case of defeat. Number 12. A bit of a surprise, it's the first member of the Elite Four we find here. At first glance, he seems badass, but this trainer is weak to 2 of the strongest moves in the game. One you have to learn to continue the adventure, which is Surf, and the other is Psychic. The special stats of his Pokemon are really poor, and even in this generation, Machamp doesn't have good moves, with Submission not even having 100% accuracy, so it's free experience in the middle of the league. Number 11. Surprisingly, we're revisiting a normally quite anecdotal trainer, but his location and team make him one of the worst trainers in the game, the Hiker at the end of Rock Tunnel, who has 2 Geodude and a Graveler. On paper, his Pokemon are easy to defeat, but the fact that you encounter him at the end of the most complicated dungeon in the game, from my perspective, means that if you're not well prepared for this battle, that is, if you haven't healed your Pokemon, your team will be weakened when you face his rock types, which can use self-destruct, and having to go through the entire cave in the dark again is something no one enjoys. So keeping the Bubble Beam TM that Misty gives you at the end of her battle isn't a bad idea if you don't want to be put in difficulty. Number 10. We've finally reached the top 10 of this ranking, and in this position, I've chosen Koga. His Pokemon are at a high level, and his Weezing knows self-destruct, but without the Levitate ability, Dig is our friend, just like Psychic, which can be obtained in Saffron City. The only direct danger is his number of Pokemon, which can wear down our team, especially with Poison-type moves. We often decide to face him early in the game to get Surf for accessing Cinnabar Island, for example, to revive Lord Helix. Number 9. Let's finally talk about the first difficult part of the adventure, the Cerulean City arc. Upon leaving Mount Moon, we're trapped in this city with no chance of return, and if we're not well prepared, trying to visit Bill at the Cape, Blue surprises us on Nugget Bridge with a small team of 4 Pokemon. The difficulty of this battle lies with Pidgeotto, which is well trained and has Sand Attack, making life hell for our Pokemon. And while it is possible to gain experience from Abra, the quick attack of the 2 Route 1 Pokemon with Stab can pose a problem before facing the starter, which has a super effective move against ours. And if you want to avoid this battle, there are not many solutions. Either you train in the tall grass to the west of Cerulean on Spearow, or you go to Number 8, Misty. In Cerulean City, the gym leader is available right away, but the challenge of her gym is much tougher than Brock's. While her Staryu is relatively manageable, Starmie is on a whole other level with its high special stat, making it one of the overused Pokemon of this generation. Misty tends to increase its defense, making it very solid against early game Pokemon, and Bubble Beam wreaks havoc if you didn't choose Bulbasaur at the start. Honestly, if this Pokemon had Psychic, Whitney's Miltank would be a piece of cake. Number 7, Lorelei. Here we have the second member of the Elite Four, the first one you face in the game. Like many trainers, she could have ranked much higher if some of her Pokemon had better moves, as they do in the remakes. One of her main issues is the game's AI, which is completely broken. Since her first Pokemon is Dugong, which knows Rest, if you send out a Poison-type Pokemon, the opposing Pokemon will keep using a Psychic-type move that does no damage, allowing you to easily boost your stats and defeat the outgoing member of the Elite Four. Also, have you noticed that like Will in the second generation, she has Slowbro and Jinx, 2 Psychic Pokemon, and her design is quite similar to his? Given what she says about the CV Islands to the main character and the mystical aspect of the Psychic type, I'm not sure they're different characters. Interesting theory. Number 6, Sabrina. Yes, for me, the toughest gym leader is Sabrina, mainly because of her type, but also because her Pokemon have very high special stats, which is also a defensive stat in these games. It is advised to defeat her 7th, just before the final battle against Giovanni in Viridian City, especially if you skip all the trainers in her gym, since optional battles get tedious. Numbers 5 and 4, Blue. The last 2 times our rival appears in the main adventure, his teams are quite competitive, and some of his Pokemon have reached their final forms, especially his starter. I placed the battle at Sylph Company in 5th position because his Pidgeot hasn't evolved yet, and Alakazam doesn't have Psychic. However, the battle against Blue is probably one of the toughest along the famous Saffron Lavender Celadon route, and is worth the trip to Fuchsia City, or even Cinnabar Island, just to gain the necessary experience to approach this fight calmly. For the battle on Route 22, it's a preview before facing him at the league, as he now has 6 Pokemon between levels 45 and 53. Raiden joins the team, providing normal type resistance, and apart from this newcomer, each pocket monster has a strong stab move. Honorable mention. Before addressing the top 3 in this ranking, I'd like to give 2 honorable mentions to 2 trainers who could have made it into this list. The first is a juggler in the Fuchsia City Gym who has high-level psychic Pokemon, including a Hypno, but since he's optional, I didn't include him. Yet, it wouldn't surprise me if he were stronger than Koga, given the level and type of his Pokemon. The second honorable honorable mention goes to Blue on the SS Ann, who doesn't appear in the ranking to avoid overloading it with Blue, but also because he's slightly less tough than the one in Cerulean City. After the battle on Nugget Bridge, there are many mandatory trainers who give our team experience, so by the time we reach the boat, where there are also many trainers, we're strong enough to handle Professor Oak's grandson. Plus, in the first generation, you can get the TM Body Slam in one of the ship's rooms, a move with 85 power and a chance to paralyze, and also dig. So you can return to number 3, Lance. In Pokemon Red and Blue, the future champion of the league doesn't just have flying-type Pokemon, as he has 2 identical Dragonair, and all his Pokemon know Hyper Beam. Considering Dragonite's attack, the first pseudo-legendary Pokemon, there's no doubt that this trainer can deal serious damage to our team if we haven't made an effort to get the TM Ice Beam or Blizzard during the adventure. And if this trainer is only 3rd, it's because of a bug in the first generation, similar to Lorelai's, as his 3 dragons know Agility, a Psychic-type move, so a Poison-type Pokemon can take down these pocket monsters without taking damage. Speaking of Poison-type Pokemon, here's number 2, Agatha. One might think her preferred type is Ghost, but Agatha actually has 5 Poison-type Pokemon, and while this type is easy to handle in the first generation, Agatha is much tougher due to her Pokemon's moves. 4 of them know Confuse Ray, 2 can use Hypnosis, and it's even hard to boost your stats since Golbat has Haze, which resets stats to their original values. So, it's a real lottery to get past this trainer if you're not well trained, and I keep saying it, but Psychic, Dig, or even Earthquake are your friends for this battle, where Ghost Pokemon don't have the Levitate ability yet. And finally, the last but not least, number 1, Blue, the champion of the Indigo League. It seemed appropriate to put the rival in the number 1 spot because he's simply the best trainer in the game, and facing him at the end of the league is a significant challenge. His team of 6 Pokemon is both varied, and for the first time in the adventure, only fully evolved forms. And what evolved forms? Let's talk about Alakazam, Exeggutor, and Raiden, which are overused in this generation. Gyarados and Arcanine are not known for being weaklings. And finally, the ultimate duel is against the opposite starter, with special mention to Blastoise, who also knows Blizzard. In the end, it's easy to beat a trainer in this game with a single Pokemon, but against Blue, it's a different story. There will always be a Pokemon that has the type advantage over you. That's all for this ranking. I hope you enjoyed this recap video and that this slightly lighter format is to your liking. Maybe it will help you next time you start your Game Boy with these games, whether you're doing a challenge or not. See you soon for a new challenge. As I said, if you have ideas or corrections to make, feel free to share them in the comments. I love reading feedback. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. It's the kind of gesture that helps small channels grow.